Well, look at the hat that my grandpa's wearing. I think everybody off the side thought it was a Trump hat. It's actually a Daze with Jordan the Lion hat. I gave you a little bit of the beef that we had for dinner last night, didn't I? You're licking the bowl clean. Do you want to say hi to your friends? After you're done, will you say hi to your friends? One Track Mind? Hey, little piggy. You're snorting. I hear you snorting down there. He likes beef. Okay, Ja, that was your chance to get your face on screen. Well, today we're back in Dayton again because we're gonna see probably the most famous thing in Dayton history. Well, we've made it to the area and you can see right there, we're going to see the very first and second location of the Wright Brothers Cycle Company, established in 1892. And you can see the age in the district right here. Now the Wright brothers actually got into the bicycling craze in the early 1890s, and the reason that was because if you've ever seen those old kind of circus-y type photos of people riding the high wheel front bicycle and then the back one is actually pretty small, right around this time where they were starting to get into the bicycles, they were Orville and Wilbur were both buying their own bicycles and experimenting with them. That's when the two balanced wheels was coming into a craze, and right here in Dayton in 1892 they had a big wheelmen's convention that brought thousands of cyclists from all over the place to come here and tour the city through bicycle riding, and they opened their shop to accommodate that. Now when the Wheelmen's Convention happened, there was actually a prize because they had about 13 different competitions that you could enter, and that's why it brought so many people, because the grand prize was actually $500. Now it's pretty great that I just happened to run into this mural because as you read it says, Home of Dayton Region's Walk of Fame. And right there you see the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur. And this is one of my favorite poets, and he's from the area, LAURENCE DUNBAR. And after we actually check out these bicycle shops or the former locations, we are going to go to the cemetery where all three of these people are buried. Now right here, behind this sign is actually the Wright brothers shop. And the reason I'm showing you this sign is because they've actually turned right here next to it into a full visitor center and museum dedicated to the Wright brothers, LAURENCE DUNBAR, and all of the famed people from the history of Dayton, Ohio. And I actually have that exact same poster at my house. Now right here above this door, you can actually see there are two plaques commemorating the Wright Cycle Company. It existed here in 1892, and then shortly thereafter they moved right next door, 1894, and they had 6 locations. Now originally they sold bicycles that other people manufactured, obviously, because they weren't building them yet. But in 1896 they decided to start building them. And there it is, the Wright Brothers Cycle Company. And right here, they actually have an example of one of the bicycles. And that's actually the model that they were known for, the Van Cleve. When they started producing their own bicycles, that was their main model. Look at this inside the house. They've really walked you down memory lane of the history of the cycles. Sterling cycles. And here you can actually see, as I mentioned outside, when they went from the big wheel in front, these were actually called safety bicycles, the regular ones that we know now. And those are the original bicycles I was telling you about. Now here, if you read this, you can actually see it says, the Wright brothers adapted many bicycle parts for the use in their first airplane. The Wright Flyer, which I have tattooed on my arm. Check that out. And here they've recreated the workshop. And this was actually in the 4th location. Can you imagine? We're standing in the location where Orville and Wilbur would have sold bicycles.
Was there anything special to the printing press that they built, or was it just...
This is really great experience. I'm loving this. And they don't even charge. They actually saw me out front filming the front and they said, "Do you want to come in?"
And then I noticed...
So now we're going to head off to the cemetery and we are going to go visit their graves, both of them.
Yeah, so the single cylinder hit and miss there, that was kind of their...
and Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of...
prepared them for aviation.
Right, I can see that, yeah. Right.
Look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, he was their assistant here, and that was just something that he excelled at.
Okay.
Now what's interesting is that most of us know the Wright brothers because they invented flight. It was them that went to Kitty Hawk in North Carolina and made this first successful flight. Now what's interesting is that they say inside that everything that they did as far as working with the bicycles actually led them to flight. The balancing, a lot of the parts, as you read in there, they used for the airplane as well that were off the bicycle. But they also had an employee named Max, I believe at the time, who actually wasn't really familiar with engines, but he was actually the one that figured out the engine that made that airplane work. And if you read in there also, the second floor of this bike shop was also a printing press, and they would print a catalog type magazine kind of advertising the bicycles that they were selling. Now since we're going to go to the cemetery and we're going to visit not only the Wright brothers but also Paul Laurence Dunbar as well as Irma Bombeck, right here gives a pretty good description, even better than I probably would have done, so I'll read it to you here to tell you who Paul Laurence Dunbar was if you're not familiar. It says, at the age of 18, Paul Laurence Dunbar began a newspaper for African Americans called the Dayton Tattler. Wilbur and Orville, Paul's classmate, printed the paper at their Hoover Block print shop, which was on the second floor of the building we were just in. Dunbar went on to achieve international fame as a poet, author, lyricist, and powerful reader of verse. He set one of his novels and short stories in fictional Ohio towns that resembled Dayton. Dunbar returned to Dayton in 1903 and purchased a comfortable brick home on the west side. He died there of tuberculosis at 33 years old. Can you believe that? Now, my fascination with Paul Laurence Dunbar actually stems from high school. They didn't teach us about Paul Laurence Dunbar in high school, not even during Black History Month that I recall. When I was in junior high, I joined a group. It was basically like a fine arts group, and they allowed you to attend plays or musicals or things like that kind of during school hours or for school credit. And one of the plays that I signed up to go see turned out to be about the life of Paul Laurence Dunbar, and it just struck me as so strong that I've always had a fascination with him ever since, and really respected what he did for African Americans in Dayton and pretty much all over the world. I mean, you heard it there. He was an author, reader of verse, and actually kind of commemorated Dayton in some of his writings. Now we're gonna head over to Woodland Cemetery. And this is the Walk of Fame that they keep mentioning. Up and down this street and the street beside it. People that are famous in Dayton. So here, right in front of that sign where it says the National Historical Park, right above it is Wright Job Printers. Right there on 3rd Street, you can see. And then if you keep walking, I'll show you. They commemorate their entire history pretty much right here. Because their bike shops, like I mentioned, pretty much lined this street over time. every time they would move, they would just stay here on this street. And I don't know if you can see that too well through the glass, but it says the birthplace of a dream. And it has commemorated all of the people and where they lived that were affiliated with the Wrights. It says 1900 Kitty Hawk kite, and then the wind tunnel, and then single adjustable rudder. All the different advances they made over 1900 to 1906, 1907, 1909. And then if you read closely here, it says the building that the Wrights called home on Hawthorne Street was purchased by Henry Ford in 1936 and moved to Greenfield Village, Dearborn, Michigan. Check that out. You can see the old the print ad that would have been there for, it looks like gold medal flour, doesn't it? Looks like you can see the gold part right there, and then metal and flour. I miss those. And how fitting that Dayton, right at the end of the block where all the Wright brothers cycle shops were, they would have a bike rental place. Gotta love it. Now here, this actually shows that was the building that we were already in, and it says right there, where the Wright brothers manufactured and sold bicycles from 1895 to 1897. And then right over here, the building right on the corner that's now the museum, right now it's the Aviation Center, was where they did the printing for Paul Laurence Dunbar. And in that photo right there, you can see what this exact building used to look like. Okay, so I think I'm actually mistaken. I think this was technically the very, very first bicycle shop where they were selling bicycles, and the one that we were inside of was the one where they were actually building the bicycles when they started building their own, manufacturing their own. So now I want to walk over to here. This section right here was also, I believe that was the last bike shop that they had over here on 3rd Street. Yeah, this would have been the very first building. And then if you can see that sign, there's a propeller there, and the sign says the Wright brothers invent yourself. And this is also, it looks like a office, now a used office, but you can actually see some of their stuff inside. Maybe I'll go and see if they'll let me look at it. There is a very good example of the Van Cleve, an 1896 adventure bike. I had to come in and take a look. I had to. Now let's get over to the cemetery. I hope this vlog isn't too confusing for you. 6 different locations. It gets a little bit hairy when you're trying to piece all the history together, especially when they have signs pointing to different buildings as being the bike shop, the house, the print shop, and you're going, well, holy cow, how many do they have? And also on their Walk of Fame is the woman who created the comic Kathy. And this memorial is for the man who created liquid crystal that they ended up using in LCD digital light displays. Now we get to cross that bridge over closer to UD, University of Dayton. Well, there it is, straight ahead of us, Woodland Cemetery. My favorite cemetery in Dayton. There we go, and right there it says, among those buried here in the cemetery are founder John Van Cleve, who the bicycle is named after, the Wright brothers, inventors John Patterson and Charles Kettering, poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, Colonel Edward Deeds, Governor James Cox, and humorist Irma Bombeck. So let's find Irma Bombeck first. I believe she's right over here. Check out that commemorative bell. It's made by the Buckeye Bell Foundation or Foundry. You can actually see it says Woodland Cemetery, Dayton, Ohio. Well, this makes it a little bit easier. And the reason they have to do that is because her actual cemetery plot is this. It's this giant rock. What's up, Mr. Squirrel? And the whole story behind this rock is that this was a rock that was on her property in Arizona, And she wanted that to be her headstone. She wanted that to be her memorial plot. So they actually had this shipped all the way here to Dayton. And I believe she made most of her name and most of her living in San Francisco, being a columnist, a humorist in San Francisco. And then here you can see there's a bicentennial Dayton Township memorial stone for 1996. And then right here behind it is a gift to commemorate, of course, the Wright brothers. That's what those bowlers are for, and I believe it says so on the other side. Yeah, dedicated to the immortal spirit of Daytonians Orville and Wilbur Wright. Now, let's go find Paul Laurence Dunbar and Orville and Wilbur Wright. And because they are so famous and well known, they actually have a marker letting you know how to find the Wright brothers here. So we're gonna look for that white square. Now I actually have to give credit to Adam, who you guys met the other day when we went to his house. Seth and I went to his house, because it's actually Adam. When I was a senior in high school, he was a junior, and we were on the news writing staff together, and we just gravitated towards each other and became really good buddies. And we would hang out on the weekends. We would go to Trader's World. We would just kind of go around town. We go record shopping about 2 blocks away from here at a place called Second Time Around. And one day he said, "We got to go to Woodland Cemetery." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's where the Wright brothers and Paul Laurence Dunbar are buried. And so is Irma Bombeck. We got to go. You got to go see it if you've never been there." Well, I had to show you this since I was passing by it. This is in memory of the soldiers and sailors of the War of 1861 to 1865. And they actually have some cannons here on display. Well, I believe we have found the Wright brothers. I'm hoping. I've been driving around for a while, and I looked over and I saw these 3 flags, and I said, I bet they put those there for the Wright brothers. Well, 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 well. Boom! Let's take a couple of those. And here we are. Wright. And here we are. Family plot. Mr. Wilbur Wright. Isn't that crazy? He didn't live too much longer after the flight. And Orville, who lived much longer. 1948. Here's their sister Catherine. The Wright brothers. Wow. So every time you take a flight, even if it's a pain in the butt, and even if you have many delays and many problems, without these guys, we'd still all be taking ships or taking trains, or life would be much more complicated without the Wright brothers. Pretty nice plot. They're actually located in section 101, so you can kind of tell right here on top of the hill that they had a pretty good plot. Very respectable. Now, let's head out of here and go find Paul Laurence Dunbar. That one might be a little bit more tricky. Dedicated by Kroger. Well, I'll tell you what's kind of funny. Just as I was about to start walking around, I glanced over here as I was coming down. I go, well, I wonder what that flag's all about. Well, that reminded me right there what it was all about. This is Paul Laurence Dunbar. And actually right up here on the flag, right in the middle of the flag, is a picture of Paul Laurence Dunbar. And I noticed, I was like, there's somebody's face up there. They didn't have that last time I was here, but here he is. The great Paul Laurence Dunbar. As you know, dead at the age of 33 with tuberculosis. Lay me down beneath de Willers and de Grasse. What a branch will go a-swinging as it pass, and when is a-layin' low, I can hear it as it go, singing sleep, my honey, take yours at last. Now, do you notice anything about this? This was Paul Laurence Dunbar's sister. And if you happen to notice that his sister died at the age of 3. I can't believe I forgot where this was. I knew that they were close by each other, but this is the first time I've ever entered from the main entrance. I always enter from the side behind my favorite candy place, Esther Price. So on our way out of here, I'm actually going to swing by and just show you the Esther Price building, because it may influence you, and I sure hope it does, to go online and order some and try it, because it is, in my opinion, it blows every other chocolate out of the water. And I'm going to say goodbye to you, Paul Laurence Dunbar. And you can see right here on the back it says that inside the mausoleum there's actually a Paul Laurence Dunbar memorial stained glass window. I'm just not going to go in there today because when I was over there earlier they were finishing up a service. And I always thought this is actually the entrance I always normally come in, and I always like this. They always have a few benches here and people are always sitting here. For the cool of the waters that run through the shadowy places, I will give thanks and adore the God of the open air. A little bit different style of font, so it was a little harder to read. Lots of these old Victorian style houses out here, but we're actually here. And my mom said for like the first time in history, Esther Price is actually expanding. So that's what all this business is right here. But Esther Price has such a strong memory in my mind because my grandmother, who we went to her grave, my grandmother always had a box of Esther Price in her freezer or refrigerator. And it's a very unique box. It's a gold box, and we'll go in there and I'll show you. Now they actually sell this in a lot of stores, and the last time I was here I bought some in the airport to take back with me, but I've never actually been inside. Let's go take a look. I gotta show you this box. The classic Esther Price box. The best candy shop ever. And this one is actually my favorite, the Opera Creams. I like the milk chocolate, not the dark, but this is the box. And this box. And there she is. There's Esther. She's the one responsible for all this amazing candy. I was actually gonna buy something, but it was a pretty long line, so I think I'll wait till I'm down here in a day or two. I honestly can't believe I've never been in there. I've eaten more than my fair share and probably yours in Esther Price candy in my life, and I finally got to go in the hub of it all. You know, I've always kind of been surprised that Paul Laurence Dunbar was buried in that cemetery so closely to the Wright family, mainly because Dayton has not always been exactly probably the most racially equal city in America, and I did a little digging and found out that actually Wilbur and Orville Wright's family employed Paul Laurence Dunbar's mother as a housekeeper. She was actually a former slave, as well as his father was had escaped from slavery. And Paul Laurence Dunbar was the only black student at Central Dayton High School, where he attended with Orville Wright. So, and he was also class valedictorian, but Orville Wright actually made arrangements when Paul Laurence Dunbar died to have him buried there, and took care of all the arrangements and made sure that he was buried near the Wright family plot. And I actually didn't know it at the time, but Paul Laurence Dunbar's mother is actually buried not too far from him in the same section. I was actually just telling my mom that I just went to Woodland Cemetery and that I had stopped at Irma Bombeck's, and she said, you know, that her next door neighbor when she lived down in Centerville was actually Phil Donahue, if you guys remember the old Phil Donahue show. Well, Ja, what do you say? Ja, what do you say? You want to call it a night? Tell all your friends you'll see them tomorrow. Alright, Lionhearts, we'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.